everybody. With the time being 7 o'clock on this sunshiny May 9th, 2022, I'd like to call the Planning and Development Committee to order. Can we please start off with a roll call?
Silkaitis.
Here.
Bala.
Here.
Leitner. Here. Bongard.
Here.
Bancroft.
Here.
Lencioni.
Yes.
Petrilla.
Here.
Wirball.
Here.
Festner.
Here.
Weber.
Present. Thank you. All right, moving right along. We got one item on the omnibus vote. I'd like a mover and a seconder.
So moved.
Second. Moved by Lencioni, second by Petrilla. Roll call, please.
Leitner.
Yes.
Bongard.
Yes.
Bancroft.
Yes.
Lencioni.
Yes.
Petrilla.
Yes.
Wirball.
Yes.
Festner.
Yes.
Silkaitis.
Yes.
Bala.
Yes.
Excellent. That carries. All right. Item 4B, we have a presentation by Rachel.
Yes.
Go for it.
Thank you. Good evening. Fox River Harley-Davidson has submitted a special use application requesting to amend the existing Zylstra PUD to permit an unpaved motorcycle test area on Lot 9 of the Zylstra Center. The subject property is currently a vacant lot located behind the dealership at 131 South Randall Road. The proposed plan will leave the lot in its current condition with just planting additional grass seed as needed. And as part of the plan, the applicant is proposing to create this landscape buffer around the edge of the site. The area will be used for scheduled classes only. The classes will be single sessions on weekends from approximately 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. The classes will run from April to October. Currently, no lights are needed or proposed at this time, as their time frame is kind of during the daylight hours. And riding is confined to a smaller portion of the lot and will leave roughly 30 to 40% of runoff space. So there is this buffer area, but their test area will be even smaller than this the vacant lot portion. The Plan Commission held a public hearing on May 3rd and unanimously recommended approval subject to resolution of staff comments. And with that, I'll turn it over for any questions.
All right, I'll open up to questions. Go ahead, Mr. Wirball.
I noticed there's a letter from a resident citing possible noise concern, but I also noted in the packet that the adventure bikes are not as loud as dirt bikes. Is that correct? Or?
Yes, the applicant is actually here if you want to answer that.
Hi, my name is Larry Woods. I'm the director of our rider training for our dealership group. And to answer your question, that is correct. These are not what's known as two-stroke engines. They're actually, I rode one here today. I don't know if anyone heard me ride in. So, I mean, that's...
Okay, so they're much quieter than dirt bikes.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the primary focus for it. Obviously, we have the existing training that has been approved and we've been doing for years. There's actually going to be fewer motorcycles on this in this application than there will be on the pavement.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Paul. So move for approval.
Second.
So moved by Lencioni, seconded by Mr. Bancroft. Can I please have a roll call on that?
Leitner.
Yes.
Bongard.
Yes.
Bancroft.
Yes.
Lencioni.
Yes.
Trilla.
Yes.
Wirball.
Yes.
Festner.
Yes.
Silkaitis.
Yes.
Bala.
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Thank you very much. Next up is 4C, presented by Alan with the Building and Enforcement Division.
Thank you. Good evening. The Building Division, Fire Department, and Electric Utility staff, upon unanimous recommendation from the Building Board of Review, is proposing the adoption of the 2021 editions of the Building and Fire Codes and the 2020 edition of the National Electric Code. The city adopts and administers standard state national codes for construction in St. Charles. Historically, the Building Division and the Fire Department staff have reviewed and updated and adopted local codes and local amendments every other revision cycle. So every 6 years, codes come out every 3. They're published every 3. This comprehensive review provides staff the opportunity to evaluate the new codes based on the latest in building technology and practices. It also provides the opportunity to evaluate the codes in context of the community's expectations and changing trends in development. Since January, the Building Division and the Fire Department have been meeting with the Building Board of Review, who are made up of a group of outside professionals that are experts in their respective fields. The Board of Review and staff have gone through a comprehensive review of the changing codes and existing amendments. This peer review challenges staff to review the adopted codes and requirements from an end user's perspective and make changes based on the group's consensus. Local amendments to the code allow a municipality to address unique circumstances and potentially provide a higher level of safety to citizens and first responders. However, since the amendments may cause unanticipated design challenges and impact the cost of a given project, it's advisable that they are reassessed each time the codes are updated. So the Board of Review and staff also consider neighboring communities' amendments so that where practical, we can adopt similar requirements to provide consistency to the contractors and developers in the Fox Valley area. Staff are again recommending, similar to the most recent code update in 2016, to reduce the number of local amendments imposed. The building code local amendments have been reduced by an additional 25%, the fire code by an additional 10%. The biggest change to the proposed amendments is the recommendation by both the Building Division and the Fire Department to delete the requirements to install fire sprinklers in single-family detached dwellings. This code requirement has been deferred every year since 2009, and we are now recommending we delete it out of the code entirely. This is only for single-family homes and 2-unit duplexes. Townhouses of 3 or more units are required to install a sprinkler system under the previously adopted code. And note, this is the same policy we've been using since 2009. Nothing is changing. We're just ending the deferment and deleting the code itself. And I can take any questions. Well, I also have the fire department here or anything specific with the sprinklers.
Questions? So you're requesting that we go ahead and move forward with the amendment?
Recommending to adopt the 2021 building codes with local amendments.
With the local amendments, okay. And that reflects the recommendation of the adjustment, the change with the fire sprinklers, correct?
Correct.
Go ahead, Rita.
Yeah. Hi. So this is just construction.
Yes.
These updates are what applies to construction, not existing buildings or...
Well, it's all encompassing. The existing building code is one of the codes we're updating and adopting. Mechanical code, fuel gas code, National Electric Code,
right.
Residential building.
Okay. I just, when I had an issue with residents years ago, but it was, if we're changing, which, you know, I get it, new science, new, you know, are updating our safety. But sometimes I think that an existing home gets caught up in that. And whenever they have a change or whenever they require a building permit, they're required to up according to those new standards, even if it doesn't apply to what they're doing. And so that's where I'm questioning. For instance, if, you know, there was a bathroom redo and then they came in for the final inspection and they didn't have wired smoke detectors, which had nothing to do with the project that they were doing, but all of a sudden they had this added expense before they could get signed off.
Sure.
So I'm wondering, does this add to that burden?
It does not.
Okay.
So for that instance, the smoke detectors are already required by code. They have to be interconnected. They're also wireless sprinkler.
Yeah, but I know, I understand with new construction, but it's also required for existing.
Yeah, so typically we only make what's being touched brought up to code. So say you're doing a bathroom remodel, we wouldn't make you touch the rest of the house.
Okay.
Basement would not be.
Okay, 5 years ago that wasn't the case, so that's why I'm clarifying.
Yeah, no,
okay,
we
good.
try to be diligent about this is what you're
Perfect.
touching, this is what needs to be brought up.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Go with that.
Go ahead, Ron.
To Rita's comment, six, 7 years ago, we had our kitchen redone, and I was required to put smoke detectors in my whole house.
Sure.
They had to be interconnected. I could either go wireless or I could have them hardwired.
Right.
But that is, I mean, even though I was just doing a kitchen, I was required by code to install wireless, and they came out, and then they did the inspection, they made sure they all
Right,
worked.
and that's pretty standard practice because it's a life safety requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Paul.
I'm curious, in the updating, I just saw this and I wanted to ask, but we're updating to a 2014 plumbing code. What is this?
The state has adopted, so that's a state code.
Okay.
And the state has adopted the 2014 state plumbing code.
Okay.
So we are mandated to adopt that.
What was it last year? I mean, are we going back?
2014.
It was 20, so we're just updating to what existed.
Correct.
We're just saying this is still the
Correct.
case.
This is what this is the code today.
Okay. Yeah, cool.
Thank you. No, go ahead, Rita.
I'm sorry.
So you said yes to me and you said yes to Ron. I think they were different questions. If I go have my my master bath redone, the inspector's going to come in and check all my smoke detectors.
Yeah, so that's been city policy for years. That's required. Anytime someone pulls a permit for their kitchen, bathroom, basement, we make sure the smoke detectors are all operational and brought up to today's code. Just the smoke detectors.
Okay. I would think that the burden of the safety of one's home is on that owner. I'm not talking multifamily, because then you're responsible for your neighbor. But, okay, all right.
It's cheaper than it used to be because you can do wireless now.
Yeah.
You don't have to interconnect and run wires all through your house.
Yeah.
So it simply is just making sure that those smoke detectors are operational.
Yeah. And the situation with my constituent was she had them above and beyond. She paid $50 a month to make sure the fire department was called the minute an alarm went off. But she didn't have a smoke detector in a bedroom, so it failed.
Sure.
So she thought her house was safer, and she wasn't allowed to make that call for herself. So that, I saw her point, and I just wondered, we're talking an $800,000 home. We're not talking some real,
Sure.
100-year-old.
Try to take all that into advisement.
Okay.
But with a wireless smoke detector, you would just have to install that one piece of equipment. So you're talking $20, $30.
Yeah, I know. She did it, and they all ended up in a garbage bag on my porch after she got her inspection. So.
As long as we see it when we're there.
Yeah. No. Anyway, okay, thank you.
Go ahead, David.
Just thought of this as Rita was mentioning. Is that policy for your team? Is that required by state law, or is that we just do that as a city? That policy of checking the health safety?
It's a city policy. CO detectors are a state law.
How long? How long have you been doing that? Not you, but but your team.
It's probably since '09. It's my best guess.
Just curious. Thanks.
All right, thank you. I'm looking for a motion and a second to amend the Title 15 of the City Code.
So move.
Second.
Moved by Wirball, seconded by Petrilla. I think everybody's here. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, we have a discussion regarding the shifting of the Board of Zoning Appeals function to the Plan Commission. Go ahead, Russ.
Yes, good evening. Staff is seeking direction from the committee regarding whether there's interest to shift the functions of our Board of Zoning Appeals over to the Plan Commission. So a little bit of background, the city's long had an independent decision-making Board of Zoning Appeals. They're made up of members that are appointed by the mayor and city council, but there really is no interaction with the zoning board members and the city council. They're an independent group. They're one of the only few remaining in the Chicago region that act as an independent zoning board that make decisions separate from the corporate authorities of the city. So historically, the city has really tried to limit the scope and number of zoning variations, both through the way our code is written, but also the rigid standards that are followed by the zoning board. So that's kept the number of variance applications down. Some years ago, the board was more active. They regularly met a few times a year. Since the city began updating its codes, really beginning in 2006, the number of variances that we've seen has dropped every year. And the board now only meets at most 1 or 2 times a year. And this past year, they actually didn't meet at all during this past fiscal year, which prompted us to raise this discussion about whether it made sense to continue to have an independent board that was constituted specifically for this purpose if they weren't seeing a lot of activity. So some considerations I mentioned in the summary. We're not suggesting that we would expand the scope of variances that are being allowed, but recognizing that if we change the process and there's sort of more viewpoints involved in the process on part of the city council as well, that there may be an interest in expanding variances in the future. So that's something that may come up as a result of this change. The zoning board as an independent group, they don't have any kind of involvement from the elected officials, so really their process has been sort of outside of that influence. So, you as elected officials because you're legislators and policymakers, you probably look at the variances a little differently than a zoning board would with more rigid rules. So that's a consideration. From staff standpoint, consolidating the zoning board with some of our more active commissions allow us to focus more on those commissions. So specifically, Plan Commission, Historic Commission, Housing Commission, which have more regular business and we're able to maintain membership a little more consistently. With zoning board, because there's been limited interest because of the level of activity, it's been hard to find and retain members, and they don't get a lot of experience or a chance to work as a cohesive group. So we frequently have vacancies, which makes it difficult for them to have votes because you're required to have 4 positive votes from that from the zoning board, even when there's not the full 7 seated members. So that's been a challenge. One of the benefits we've had is that we've had a long-term chair who runs the commission and a vice chair who's been there for a while as well. They've kind of kept the consistency in the group, but we can't guarantee how long they'd be willing to stay on. So we're looking for direction to see if there's interest in pursuing this concept, shifting the zoning variance function specifically to Plan Commission. If those functions were merged, the process you're familiar with Plan Commission is the process we would follow with variance applications. So there would be a public hearing by the commission and a recommendation, and they would then come before the P&D committee for review, similar to other zoning applications, and the city council would ultimately vote to approve or deny the variance. But there would still be findings involved, but the scope of the review would be a little bit different. And because this amendment to the code would require amending the zoning ordinance, we'd have to go through the general amendment process, which requires a public hearing before Planning Commission to make this code change. So we need to go through a process to develop that and get feedback on how it's structured. And so that's something we would undertake if there was interest from the committee in pursuing this.
Thank you, Russell. With that, I'll open up to questions. Go ahead, Ed.
So, Russ, typically the Plan Commission now meets twice a month, right? So roughly 24 times a year for simple math. And the zoning or board meets a couple times a year, maybe once a quarter at best?
Yeah, at most. And actually the past few years, they've only met 1 or 2 times. In the past year, they didn't meet at all.
So I heard you mention there might be a way to merge some zoning requirements into a typical Plan Commission meeting. But do you foresee just 1 or 2 meetings a year the Plan Commission might have to just zone in on zoning?
Well, so I think they would have variance applications on their agenda.
Sure.
So similar to how they have kind of different types of other zoning applications. So we'd have to establish with them through some training kind of a process. They knew how to handle the zoning variances procedurally, because they're a little different than the other types of applications they see. But I think that as long as we follow the same system of how we kind of review those and have the commission hold hearings and provide recommendations, I think they could do it fairly consistently with their...
Right. I guess I'm just wondering if there's going to be any conflict. I'm for it, so I'm just curious if there's going to be any conflict in regards to, some of the zoning decisions are in stone and the Planning Commission is more of a recommendation.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Brian.
So I served on the zoning board for 4 years, and we met once, twice a year, maybe 3 times a year. So what I liked about it was that it was independent from the council. There were no politics involved. I liked that we didn't interact with the council, no offense, but I liked that we didn't do that. I like the fact that, one thing I would recommend and maybe think about is if we go from 7 members to 5, I think that would be much better. I think you would just need 3 people to approve things. I would suggest that. I think you currently have 5 members right now on the zoning board. So that's something I would be in favor of, is going from 7 to 5. I don't like the process that it would go through to Plan Commission, to P&D, to the City Council. I just think it's something about it being independent that really is important, and I think it works well. I remember being on it, and I remember leaving if there was a continuation of the hearing. We were told you don't talk to anybody. You don't talk to other members, and I like that. It kept it just very neutral. And so I would like to keep this going, but reduce it from 7 members to 5.
Go ahead, Paul.
Respectfully, I disagree with the idea of keeping it. I think when you're not meeting enough, I think zoning and you know, just everything that goes into, you know, understanding zoning, understanding how residents deal with things. The idea of having a board like that doesn't mean enough to get to be really proficient and comfortable with the process. I think that's the greatest risk that we have. So if people aren't meeting enough to really like understand the responsibilities between property owners' rights, how the city works, and all the rest of it, I think it sounds like a decent idea. I see where you're coming from, but I think the greatest risk is to have a board that doesn't meet and get enough experience quickly enough to handle things, especially when they matter. So I support you, especially if other people. Has any other communities had problems with it doing it that way? Worked pretty well for most anybody?
Well, it's common that you'll have more variance applications. Depends how you structure the code requirements, but it tends to sort of broaden the opportunity for variances when you're going through a more political influence process.
Go ahead, Ryan.
So I was on the zoning board of appeals as well. I think Brian and I crossed paths a little bit. I think I'm in support of this. If nothing more, it's just the reality of being able to keep this group together and finding people. The purpose that it serves makes a lot of sense, but just the reality of being able, if you're not meeting for an entire year, you know, then it's a year and a half, and it's 2 years. Our ability to roll this into another body, I like, you know, that it was independent, but just the reality of making this work. I mean, I think we met 3 times that 1 year, and it's a challenge. So I'm in support of finding a way to merge it somewhere else.
Go ahead, Rita.
What's the difference between the BZA meeting 3 times a year or whatever at most, and then the Plan Commission meeting as the BZA? I mean, you still have to have the same training, you still have to have the same updating, and we're just piling on to the Plan Commission, who I think is already kind of under the pile. I think that we're already having issues with them, you know, checking all the boxes they need to check as it is. So I don't understand what the difference is. They'll still need to be brought up to date, and they'll still need to be trained, and they'll still need to be advised as to what's coming up. So that way I don't understand what the difference is in the training and the meetings and all that will go when it leaves their own organization to blend in with another one. I still think the same issue will be there. And secondly, you know, I can appreciate Mr. Wirball's comments on keeping it independent. These aren't necessarily developers or, you know, or big organizations coming in and looking for this. Lots of times they're homeowners. And I think that keeping that separate and independent from the political body and the political body's one-off is, you know, is smart and trusting. So I kind of like his, you know, Brian's idea of maybe let's diminish it a little bit before we cut it out and see if we can, you know, do the 5 to 3 or whatever. But I don't see how the issues involved with keeping the BZA up to date and all that is diminished by moving it over to Plan Commission.
Go ahead, Rich.
Did you say earlier on we are one of the few municipalities that do have this board, or did I misunderstand you?
Yes, it's not as common to have, it's not necessarily that it's unusual to have a standalone zoning board. It's just unusual at this point in time to have one that is the final decision-making body that makes decisions separate from the city council.
Go ahead, Ron.
So all these years, we've never had a problem with the system we have in place, correct? So I don't necessarily see a reason to change it. As my other 2 colleagues have stated, I like it being independent. Keep the politics out of it. These are just, most of the time, these are people, one homeowner who wants a variation of 6 inches or something. I want to keep it the way it is. If we want to go to 5, that's fine. But I'm not in favor of combining the 2 at all. I think it's worked well all these years. I see no reason to change. It's working, why change it?
Heather, you have a comment?
Yeah, just a quick clarification. The statute actually requires us to have 7 members, so the reduction to 5 is not appropriate or possible. And I think the main driving issue here that we've talked about at a staff level is just ensuring that we have adequate people for representation and they understand their role, which is difficult because of the minimal number of times they meet during the year.
Go ahead, David.
So Russ, what's the, in your opinion, why does this board only meet so frequently? Is it just because there are not variance requests, or is it a schedule that they impose?
It's a combination of things, but for one, the city made an effort some years ago, I mentioned in 2006, when the new zoning ordinance was adopted, to try and write all of the zoning codes around existing development, so that, if you were trying to construct something that was similar to what existed in your neighborhood, you wouldn't have to get a variance to do that. Prior to that time period, that was pretty common that you would have to. But also, our code specifically limits the scope of what you can request a variance for. There's certain requirements, and there's certain percentage limitations that you can request. So between those two items, and the fact that our board just has a pretty consistent practice of adhering to the standards fairly rigidly, people, when they inquire with us about potential variance applications, ask, have similar applications been heard in the past, and what was the outcome, and kind of what were the factors that are considered. So a lot of times when we provide that information, they're discouraged from requesting a variance.
So do you think that if this were merged, that there'd be a consequential uptick? I think you made a comment.
I think it's
earlier.
likely to be some uptick because of the change in the process.
Okay. So obviously it's not,
I just want to, a follow-up question for Heather's comment. So you're saying that there's no way we can ever change the ordinance to make it smaller?
It's state statute that grants the authority for that board. We can vest the authority in the Plan Commission and merge those two, but if we have a separate zoning board of appeals, it requires 7 members. And as Russell pointed out, it does require an affirmative vote of 4 members to actually pass anything, regardless of if there's only a quorum present.
Okay, and again, I need some assurance, I guess, that our Plan Commission is going to be as up to snuff as, with all their, all these concerns, that we're only getting it, very infrequently with the zoning board.
And certainly I don't want to step over Russell. I know that they just recently conducted a training with the Plan Commission. I think the idea and the intent is that with a board that meets more regularly, it's easier to keep them up to speed on any changes necessary, as well as they're just expecting that frequency of meetings. So it's easier to get them to attend meetings and to be present for those trainings.
Okay, and can I ask too, was this question presented to the current group, Plan Commission-wise, or BZA, whatever it was?
No, I think we wanted to get input from this group first before we initiate.
Because I would be curious as to, they're the ones in the trenches. Is the Plan Commission going to say, oh, geez, we don't need one more thing? Or, or is the Board of Zoning Appeals going to think, hey, we're doing a good job? So I just was curious as to what.
No, and I think the intent is really just to look at it from a more objective process standpoint than getting the feedback on those members who may like or dislike anything about the process itself, and just look at it objectively and making sure that what we're doing from a policy standpoint and a business standpoint makes most sense for the city's businesses and the residents.
Go ahead, Brian.
So what is the process, or what efforts have been made to recruit people to the zoning board? So there's probably some people that are not even familiar residents what the zoning board is. And for me, I learned it just by coming to meetings and things like that. So what are we doing to possibly recruit people for the zoning board?
And I think that's similar to any vacancies on any board. We have a large number of commissions and boards in the city. So anytime there are vacancies, typically what's happened with the mayor's process this year is reaching out to the business community, reaching out to those residents that are familiar with zoning, construction, architecture, things of that nature, to see if there's any interest. And it's a lot of word of mouth, putting any sort of releases out that we can gain some interest from the community.
But are we advertising on our website? Do we push something, hey, we're looking for people maybe with a little experience in construction, because I don't see anything on our website as far as looking for commissioners to be appointed.
That has been done. I think it's just difficult with the sheer number of boards and commissions that we have to fill each one of those roles. So the more we can sort of combine duties to make them make sense, and Plan Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals, that's certainly where there's a lot of duty overlap, and that's why so many communities merge those two. That's just really the idea, is trying to make sure that you have qualified applicants, people who understand the process on each of those commissions that are making the right decisions.
Thank you.
Okay, so, Russell, obviously, it's not something we're gonna vote on, you're just looking for, discussion that we had up here.
Yeah.
From what I'm hearing up here, it seems like 6 of 9 or 5 from 9 feel like this should be discussed further. Is there a way that you could have a conversation with the BZA chairman and the Planning Commission chairman and have a discussion and see where their heads are at?
Sure.
Does that seem fair to everybody?
Yep.
Get some feedback from both those chairs?
Yep.
Yes? Okay.
Sure.
Thank you, Russell.
Yep.
Next up, we have item 4E, which is to vacate the right-of-way of North 8th Avenue between Cedar and State Avenues. Go ahead, Russell.
Yes. So staff's been approached by a property owner that owns parcels of land that contain vacated right-of-way. And this right-of-way is shown as vacated on county plats and tax maps, and it is private property. So this question's come up in relation to a pending property sale. The two parcels that are identified as vacated, we cannot find a record that the city took an official action to formally vacate the right-of-way. But the documentation exists back from as early as when the railroad was constructed through St. Charles in the late 1800s, that property was not being used for streets and was being used for the railroad at that time. And so the current owner, as part of a sale, is trying to find some documentation from the city to substantiate that the right-of-way has been vacated. So what they've requested is that the city provide documentation that could be in the form of an ordinance recognizing the vacated right-of-way. And so we're in discussions with the city attorney and the property owner's representative to determine the exact form of that. But we're seeking a recommendation to proceed and would bring to City Council an ordinance that would formally document that right-of-way vacation.
Go ahead, Paul.
This one's pretty easy, as you know, Russell, I'm familiar with it. These roads don't even exist anymore. So I would like to make a motion to vacate the right-of-way for North 8th Avenue between Cedar and State, and Cedar Avenue east north of 9th Avenue.
Second.
So moved by Lencioni, seconded by Wirball. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion carries. Thank you very much. Next up, we have public comment. Nobody here to speak? All righty. All righty. Any additional items from mayor or committee members? No. Staff? No. No need for executive session. Can I have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting?
So move.
Second.
Moved by Wirball, seconded by Petrilla. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Good round.